discussion. And I'd like to introduce our presenters from each of the three agencies. First of all, Dan Levitt, who is manager of the regional initiatives with the San Joaquin Joint Power Authority and San Joaquin Regional Rail Commission, which oversees service for both the Altamont corridor and the San Joaquin corridor. That includes actually all the way down to Bakersfield, so Fresno, Modesto, Stockton, Sacramento. And these are not trains to nowhere. There are 5 million people in the Central Valley, but also serving the Bay Area. 365 miles of service and 18 stations. So I guess what we're going to do, Mike, is just introduce one at a time, then have them do a presentation, then we'll you want to take questions after each presentation or wait?
Totally.
Well, we'll see
totally
how the board. I'd probably like to at least get a few questions in if there are any before it becomes stale. So, Dan, why don't you go ahead?
Great. Thank you very much. Really appreciate this opportunity to give you an update on the efforts of the San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority. And I think the PowerPoint's going to be coming up soon. It's PowerPoint.
You can't
Okay.
see that?
I'm glad it's not just me.
Dan is with San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority.
They have hard copies in front of you?
There we go.
Great. So the San Joaquin Intercity Passenger Rail Service is one of the 3 state-supported intercity services. This service is funded completely by the state of California, but it's operated by Amtrak. And currently there are 6 daily round trips, 4 between Oakland and Bakersfield and 2 between Sacramento and Bakersfield. It's about 364-mile-long service. In addition to the rail service, the San Joaquin actually have a very extensive thruway bus network. And if you look on this map, the blue line shows you the San Joaquin, and all those red dotted lines are thruway bus services. About 45% of the San Joaquin passengers actually use a thruway bus on at least one end of their trip to take them throughout California and even to Nevada. So if you haven't ridden a San Joaquin train, as Steve mentioned, this is there. It's operating. This is an example of one of our train sets. We do share equipment with the Capital Corridor. If you've ridden those, it's the same type of equipment. It's a very comfortable ride, free Wi-Fi service. You can get up, walk around, plug in your laptop, or use your cell phone on the train. You can go get a meal or purchase a beverage as well on your journey. Ridership for the San Joaquin service has been increasing over the years. We're now at about 1.2 million passengers a year. That makes the San Joaquin service the 5th most used intercity service in the country. We take over 100 million vehicle miles traveled off the freeways every year for the San Joaquin service. And the fare box ratio in 2013 was about 55%, which is pretty good for intercity services. While revenue has been increasing over the years, the frequency of the service hasn't increased for some time, more than a decade since any service was added to Sacramento, and over 2 decades since service was added between Oakland and Bakersfield. This map shows you the 3 state-supported services. So we have the San Joaquin in the Valley, the Capital Corridor from Auburn to Sacramento, and the Pacific Surfliner from San Luis Obispo all the way down to San Diego. These 3 services are all completely funded by the state, but they're all operated by Amtrak. The Capital Corridor has been under the governance and management of the Capital Corridor Joint Powers Authority for more than 15 years. The other 2 services have been governed and managed by Caltrans Division of Rail. In 2012, legislation was passed and signed which enabled the creation of a new JPA to follow the model of the Capital Corridor, take over the governance and management from the state to bring this to a regional JPA. The agency that I work for, the San Joaquin Regional Rail Commission, was selected as the managing agency in 2013. And we haven't actually taken over the governance and management of the service yet. We still have one more step to go through, and that is to get an interagency transfer agreement signed with the state of California. That work is well underway. The negotiations are well underway, and we expect to be completed by the end of the year. This map just shows you the geographic representation of our 10-member agencies, one member agency for each county that's shown here on the map. For Sacramento, SAC-RT, Councilmember Cohn is our board member. Patrick Hume from Elk Grove is our alternate. Member Cohn is actually vice chair for the JPA, and appreciate his efforts to help move this along. Under the provisions of our enabling legislation, even after we take over the management of the service, the state still has very prominent roles. It coordinates the three services, it oversees the three services, and most importantly, it continues to fund the three services as it has for the Capital Corridor over the last 15 years. For this current year, the service will remain as it is today with the 6 daily round trips. The good news in looking ahead is that Caltrans has been doing the work needed to be able to expand the San Joaquin service to add an additional round trip, a 7th daily round trip. However, that will be between Oakland and Bakersfield. The work to do that is all underway. It will be completed mid-2015. The improvements to the freight railroads that will enable us to be able to run one more train, so that we're looking to have a 7th daily round trip added as early as a year from now. The state is also working on an 8th daily round trip, again, between Oakland and Bakersfield, and they need about $100 million more for that. We're working to try to get additional funds to be able to deploy an 8th daily round trip as well. The last bullet that's shown here is that a problem that we've seen is that currently there are no plans to increase the frequency between Sacramento and Bakersfield, and the JPA really recognizes this as a true impediment to the future growth of the service. With only 2 daily round trips, and one of those daily round trips doesn't even get into Sacramento until close to midnight, this is a real problem in terms of being able to grow the ridership and revenue for the service. And so one of the first actions that the JPA will take once we take over the management is to work with the freight railroads to try to get some sort of an agreement to be able to get more service and find out what the improvements are necessary to be able to bring more trains to Sacramento. Another key concept of the JPA that I wanted to point out to you today is that currently all the San Joaquin trains run from one end of the corridor to the other. So that, for example, the first train leaves Bakersfield around 5 a.m. It doesn't get into Oakland until around 11. The first train from Bakersfield doesn't get into Sacramento till afternoon, and the first train from Oakland to Bakersfield doesn't get into Bakersfield till noon. We believe that if we can get service to the endpoints early, it can greatly increase the ridership and revenue for our services. So if we were able to start a train in Merced instead of Bakersfield, we could have the first train arrive in Oakland by 8 a.m. We could, if we start again in Merced around 5 a.m., we can get to Bakersfield by 8 a.m. And we could start in Merced closer to 6 a.m. and we could get to Sacramento by around 8 a.m. as well. We think this would bring an incredibly new markets to the service by being able to serve early morning trips and potentially business travelers. We also are looking at adding some additional stations, which we think will be particularly important once high-speed rail comes into play. But if you look in the Sacramento leg between Lodi and Sacramento, we're talking about looking at stations at both 65th Street Station in Sacramento and at Elk Grove, which have been supported by the region. Also, we're looking at extensions of the line, and there's a simple little extension just 5 miles past Jack London Square. The San Joaquin service could then connect with the Oakland Coliseum BART station, a direct connection with BART, and with a new connection to the People Mover to Oakland International Airport. The JPA in the future will have a much more community-based outreach approach, much more grassroots outreach, and we also see the need to reach out to the diverse populations of the corridor. We are doing a lot more advocacy work than has been done in the past for this corridor. We work with our partner agencies, the Capital Corridor, the Pacific Surfliner, and emerging corridors in the coast and in Southern California to advocate for service improvements, to try to get more resources to grow the program. We were successful this year in working with the state to make sure that intercity was a key component of the cap and trade funds. Our next board meeting is December 5th. We're looking to have our board approve an update to our business plan. and we hope to have the ITA dependencies completed by then. Again, the transfer is on schedule to be done. The agreement is to be signed by the end of the calendar year. And this is our website for more information about the JPA. And before I conclude, I just had 3 really quick slides I wanted to show you in regards to our other service. As Steve mentioned, that the San Joaquin Regional Rail Commission is also the managing agency. We are the owner-operator of the ACE commuter service between Stockton and San Jose. We are doing improvements, working to increase the ACE service. We have 4 daily round trips today. We're looking to increase to 10. We're also looking to increase, to move the service to be able to expand to Merced, to do this within the next 10 years. And if you look on this map, if we're able to be successful, this would bring a direct connection to the high-speed rail proposed terminus in Merced and bring connectivity to the northern San Joaquin Valley and the Bay Area before high-speed rail expands further to the Bay Area. The reason I want to bring this to your attention is that we not only want ACE to be able to go down to Merced, we would like ACE to extend to Sacramento. We think that there's a tremendous market between Merced and Sacramento, between Sacramento and San Jose, and as well as the other markets that ACE currently serves. To do this extension between Sacramento and Stockton, ACE would work with the San Joaquin on shared infrastructure. And so I want to call to your attention that there's actually 2 efforts moving forward that are looking to expand service and connectivity to Sacramento, to the San Joaquin Valley, and to the High-Speed Rail Authority service. And that's my last slide.
Could you leave that last
Yeah.
slide up?
Sure.
All right, go ahead.
Thank you.
So was that it?
That's it.
That's it, yeah.
Thank you.
I asked to leave up that last slide because I think it's a good transition to the high-speed rail presentation we're going to hear next. But largely through efforts from Dan and his boss, Stacy Mortensen, she's the head of what's the San Joaquin Rail Commission?
Regional Rail
Is that
Commission.
The technical name, but that runs the ACE train
ACE service.
out of Stockton. And what we've been doing is working very closely with our next speaker, Ben Treposis of the California High-Speed Rail Authority, to make sure that there are connections to Sacramento region immediately, not as part of phase 2, 20 some odd years from now, but immediately. And that way Sacramento has connectivity either through the valley over to San Jose as well as down the Capitol Corridor, which we'll hear from third in this lineup. So any questions for Dan before we bring up the speaker from High Speed Rail? Yeah, David.
Having served on the Regional Transit Board, I was sort of surprised to see a 55% fare recovery ratio. That's probably more than double the regional transit rate. Is that normal for intercity rail? Because I'm not familiar with looking at those services.
Actually, all 3 intercity services, the Capitol Corridor is right around 50%. The Pacific Surfliner is over 55. It's been higher than that. Actually, our A service now is over 50% as well, because our A service is long enough that it's almost an intercity service as well as commuter. So for the longer distance, these are good. We're getting good numbers for California, but it's not unusual.
I have to say, though, it hasn't always been that way. These numbers have gone up over the years. And, of course, bear in mind you're only serving a defined corridor by rail. If you only measured light rail, for example, and if we didn't have as many discounts as we have with RT, the fare box ratio would look a lot better as well. But local transit's expected to serve. Yeah, very different type. But the numbers could get a lot higher, as Dan was talking about. Some of the ideas for changing the service to capture. Right now you can't get into Sacramento until afternoon by train. They do have bus service connections, but if you want to take a direct train, you don't get in till noon, and you don't get back until midnight if you take a train from Sacramento. We're obviously, not meeting a lot of demand there. So that's one of the key things, I think, from having local and regional representation on the board that now governs this. You the opportunity for innovation is much greater. And we'll talk a little bit about the Capital Corridor. You know, there used to only be 4 round trips. And then when we took over as a regional board, figured out ways using the same pot of money to change the service and add round trips. So that's kind of innovation I think we are hoping to see by having a local operator like ACE head up the San Joaquin. Any other questions? Yeah.
My one question I'm looking at is if you're looking at shorter services from the Merced to Sacramento type of service, will those passengers from further down the line, are they going to have to do a transfer in Merced, or are they going to be able to go through?
We do not believe they need to transfer because we would have both types of service. And I should have mentioned this, but we're looking at this not replacing the existing service, but for the future. And we think that even we should look at this for the 7th and 8th daily round trip and for some of the future new services, so not to replace the existing. So you'd have some trains that go through and some that actually start mid-corridor. So it'd be a combination.
Thank you, Dan. Stick around. I'm sure there'll be some crossover questions. So I'd like everyone on the panel, if you're able to, stick around throughout.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Mike?
Chair Cohen, we're running just a little bit early, and we'd asked the high-speed rail people to be here at 10. So we do have 2 representatives from Capital Corridor.
That's fine.
If you want to, including, I think James is going to do the presentation, but I know I saw the Executive Director David Kotrowski's in the house, so.
Okay, great. Thank you. Then we'll go ahead and move on to Capital Corridor. Let me call on David first. David is, I don't have his bio in front of me, but I think it's been, is it 5 years now that you've been, how long have you been director?
4 years, 11 months, and 13 days.
Oh, I got ahead of myself. Okay. Yeah.
What's your average fare recovery?
And I have
I know
to
that
say,
question.
David had very big shoes to fill too, because he replaced kind of a legend in the rail business, passenger rail business, Gene Skoropowski. And by the way, you don't have to be Polish to be head of a rail agency, but
Don't have to put a vowel at the end of your name. No.
with the Capital Corridor, it helps. But that was probably an inappropriate comment. But at any rate, Gene had taken over the Capital Corridor almost from the beginning, early on when the service was being formed, and really turned it around to become a very vigorous service, a frequent and the fastest growing service in the country. But then David came along with, has really not only maintained but really accelerated that progress. So very pleased to introduce David Kotrowski. And David, if you could, after your introductory comments, go ahead and introduce Jim.
Sure. Well, thank you, Chair Cohen and Board of Directors. It's a pleasure to be here. I am going to be doing a presentation, but I'm only going to bore you for a couple of slides here, and I'm going to turn over to the really exciting material from Jim Allison, our Manager of Planning. This is our dog and pony show, and let the record show I'm the dog and he's the pony. And but I want to thank Dan for doing the presentation ahead, where he laid at the end with the future planning. That's what this presentation for you is going to focus on. Chair Cohen has been very active with our board since its inception, and he's been pushing us to continually update and improve our vision plan. That's what you're going to see today. But just as a little bit of a backdrop, as Dan mentioned, it's a 170-mile corridor for the Capital Corridor. We go from the Sierra foothills at Auburn in through the Sacramento Valley, down into the Bay Area and into San Jose. We are the only transit spine that covers that entire region. We have what I think is a stellar service. Could it be better? Yes. We don't rest on our laurels. We've introduced and we've been at the forefront of putting in, way back when I first started, about 1998, putting on the digital signs to give you the ETAs. We were the first in the intercity rail business to do that. We were the first to have a superior Wi-Fi service. We helped roll that out, as well as e-ticketing. And so we tend to be guinea pigs with Amtrak, and so we're going to be rolling out some more passenger ticketing improvements over the next year. If you go to the Amtrak app on your smartphone, you can buy a one-way or round-trip ticket. We just signed an agreement with Amtrak where we'll be able to add on multi-ride tickets. 55% of our users use multi-ride tickets, and most of them are young, and technology is a common occurrence in their life. And so we want to start to improve and make our services better. We just finished the FY14 year. Ridership was up 1%. It started off not too good the first 6 months, but the last 6 months we've seen about 3% growth. A lot of that is due to a recovering economy, especially down in Silicon Valley. We have a lot more riders going into San Jose and Silicon Valley. We've also seen an increased ridership into the Sacramento market in the morning, which I come up here about once a week, and I'm seeing a lot more riders. So we're pleased to see that, and our weekends are really starting to pick up, especially with service to the 49ers events at Levi Stadium. We're seeing about 11% increase in ridership over the weekends, and that's primarily due to Raider games and 49er games. We're going to have an interesting rollout sometime, I think it's next month, when the Niners play the Raiders over at the Oakland Coliseum. So we're going to have probably 2 separate train sets coupled together, and just silver and black and maroon and gold. So. But I digress there. But we did finish, as I mentioned, on the upswing with ridership. Revenue was flat, and our fare box recovery was 50%. And our proud record continues. We finished the year at 95% on-time performance, and that's 5th year in a row counting. And that's a lot of that goes to our positive partnership and business partnership with Union Pacific Railroad, which they dispatch our trains ahead of their freight trains. I know that. I see it, and I appreciate it. And so I pay them about $3 million a year in incentive payments. As far as our vision plan goes, there's a short, medium, and long term. We're going to focus on short term. Right now is what we're working on are some service expansion plans, as you're probably aware, to Roseville, our third track project, which will allow a service increase from the 1 daily round trip, 1 train in each direction, to 10 in each direction, as well as additional service down to San Jose to go from 7 round trips to 11 round trips. And we're working with Dan and his team at ACE on that. The medium term is 10 to 20 years. That's projects, once again, are on the planning horizon, and we need lots of work on that, and we'll tell you about our implementation of that. And then the long term is what I will really want to thank again Chair Cohen for really pushing us, making us think outside the box. This longer term, and while it says 20 plus years, it is a monumental shift. It's a game changer for the Capitol Corridor. It's more frequent, it's higher speed, and will be a lot more competitive than sitting in Highway 80, 680, or 880. As far as the principles and objectives go, the Capitol Corridor, once again, I mentioned it's a transit spine. We are the only service that connects to the MPOs, and it helps provide, once again, a spine for the mega region, the Northern California mega region. We're trying to do everything we can to make it seamlessly integrated. Right now, it may be a bit antiquated, but it works. We have these transit transfers, so if you're riding the train, you're a ticketed passenger, just ask the conductor. You get 2 of these, one to get you from the train onto the bus or light rail at any of our stations to your endpoint, and then coming back, you could use the second one. You deposit it into the fare box. Once again, it's not fully technically superior, but it is something that we can provide. And I know when we run out of those because the passengers are emailing me, so they are using them. And I just saw them. I took the Route 30 SAC RT bus, and there was a queue of passengers coming off our train, and they were sticking them into the fare box. We pay SAC RT and any of our other agencies based on those collected tickets and transfers. We're adapting to the impacts of sea level. It's something that we take seriously because we recognize we are an important transportation mobility option in the Northern California mega region, and we see some serious concerns, which Jim will highlight, on rising tides. And it is something that, while it's not here now, it is pretty daunting when you see what it happens to our service, as well as all of our neighbors and the airports, and all the Bay Area will be impacted by this. And just, it's not a matter of if, it's when. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Jim so that he can go into more detail. He's put a lot of time and love into this. And thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Well, I guess I'm the little pony, My Little Pony because I'm the pony part of the show, so I will get going. Oops, wrong way. Okay, David talked a little bit about the sea level rise, and I'm going to go into this a little bit more. We had a Climate Corps Bay Area fellowship at Capitol Corridor that used her GIS skills to analyze some of these impacts. So we're going to get into these a little bit because they do affect the long-term vision plan that we, oops, it keeps going the wrong way. So what she did for us was to assess the condition of our rail, the elevations of our rail relative to different low spots where we have impacts with rising tides or rising seas or susceptibility to storms. So she went through a process to understand that, and that was going to inform our long-range vision plan. She used the Adapting to Rising Tides process, which has been developed in consultation with various federal partners, but mainly led by the Bay Conservation Development Commission. And it goes through a process of analyzing the conditions you have today, and then assessing those against the assets on the ground, such as the ballast of the track, the signal system, the stations, the parking, and then determining different factors about how those will be affected, whether they are impacted in terms of they are damaged or whether they are functionally not working, such as the signaling system being out due to electrical outage. So they went through this analysis, and we're kind of at the point of understanding what our impacts are at this point, and now we have some other questions that we'll be asking in the future, but I'm not going to go into those today. So this is just the process, just outlining what physical assets are in providing our service. And then obviously those, when they are disrupted, will have service level impacts, and that includes maintenance impacts or small outages for hours at a time if there's like a storm event. But as David was saying, over time, these won't be just storm events. There will be a new normal with a new higher tide. So what she had done, this is the map of our service area. There's approximately 6 different hotspots, and they all have different impacts and different conditions, neighbors as well. So for instance, at the top there in the Sassoon Marsh, that's more of a groundwater type issue where we already are having subsidence of the track. So Union Pacific spends more of their maintenance dollars right now trying to continually maintain this as the track slowly subsides. Then as we get to Martinez and then around the coast, for those of you who've been on the ride, you are right there looking at the water. And Martinez is especially an impact area. And then as we come around Point Pinole and then further down into the Oakland area, we have our maintenance yard that's susceptible to rising tides. And then there's other communities in addition to the track that are susceptible. So these kind of things are coming into our planning horizon at this point in time, simply due to the fact that we have an asset here that has such a long lifespan. And we need to, when we make these long-term vision plan decisions, accommodate the impacts over that span of time. So as we look for what we're going to do with our vision plan, the long-term plan, we are looking at a massively different service, as David indicated. We're looking at 15 to 30-minute headways. There would be 30 to 60-minute off-peak headways. The travel on the trains would be significantly faster. We're talking about, with some express trains, getting from Sacramento into Oakland in slightly under an hour, and with a timed connection to some work that would have to happen at the San Francisco BART area with a new station to get into San Francisco, a new tube. So all of these things are really regionally and mega regionally combined. And then certainly more frequency, because as you'll see, to provide this level of service, we're going to need our own dedicated track. And I'm talking dollars that we have not identified yet, because it's these are very aspirational, but we think as we're looking at things, this is going to be what our generation now needs to put in for the next generation. So the focus on this rest of this talk is really on the long term, which is this transformational step that we're making. So we're in a draft process at this point in time. We have an ad hoc vision plan subcommittee of our board examining this, And at this point, they've looked at the high-level engineering required to, or some of the high-level screening analysis of different alternatives required to pull off the vision plan. Very shortly, actually Monday, we're going to be revealing to that group the ridership growth that we would expect to see, and then look for their direction on some next steps. But for now, we have just really the engineering talk to give you at this point in time. So this corridor is essentially broken up into several segments. We did not concentrate on the extreme ends of the segment, in other words, the Placer County segment, nor the talked about extension to Salinas, because we need to make sure that the core of the Capital Corridor, as we know it from Sacramento down to kind of San Jose, is taken care of and it's feasible. So it's broken into 4 segments. We have San Jose to Oakland, then Oakland approximately up to Richmond, then Martinez or so, Richmond, and then up to Sacramento. Each issue has key difficult challenges with it. Some are more difficult than others. In San Jose to Oakland, it's difficult, but not as difficult to do this. There's basically an issue of which alignment to pick. In the Oakland to Richmond area, this is an extremely challenging area. It's a very heavily built out environment. And there are, there's built infrastructure next to the right-of-way, and it's certainly looking that we might need some more right-of-way, but that's an opportunity that also BART is thinking about as well. So we're talking with BART and the local jurisdictions about how we would go about realizing that opportunity. Then finally, between Richmond and Sassoon-Fairfield, that's another great challenge that we have, because to speed up the service as we hug the coast, that is a lot of curves and a lot of slow travel time, and we've looked at options to tunnel through part of that or do some cut and fill to speed that travel time up. And then there's the crossing of the Carquinez Straits. Right now we have a lift bridge that some of you may have been on the train and have experienced. That kind of condition would not be acceptable when you have 15-minute type headways. Your entire service would be disrupted for the day. So we need to build a new high-level railroad crossing. And then finally, from Sassoon-Fairfield to Sacramento, it's more or less a straight shot. We are on a very good alignment, and the shortest path we can have is really the direct distance between those lines, and we have that today. We just need to get that in more or less public ownership and rights to do that. So here's what I was talking about with San Jose to Oakland. There's basically 2 different alignments that can be chosen. One is a little closer to the bayside, one is further to the hillside. Both of those will require a straightening of existing alignments, which means probably some property takes and things like that. But that is actually the easier step. In Oakland, we have some very difficult challenges. As I mentioned, we have existing tunnels that go to over blanking on that. Alameda, yes, gosh. I kept on thinking Albany, it's not that. So those Poser and Webster tubes are physically in the way if we were to kind of try to have the train divert and go under some of the built environment. It's very difficult to use the existing alignment because you're right in the middle of a commercial area. And there really are no inexpensive options here, and we're going to have to look at a number of different options to get through this. Then in Oakland here, presuming we get through that challenge, there are a number of alternative alignment options that both keep freight whole and then would allow Capital Corridor to travel up. Then here between Oakland and Richmond, we will likely need additional right-of-way and share that right-of-way with the freights, but we will have to be more physically separated than we certainly are today. And that's, again, talking right-of-way in an urban environment. Richmond to Sassoon-Fairfield, we're looking at a option. If you look along the Franklin Canyon or Highway 4 alignment there's an option to get off our existing route right now, get into that canyon and do some different tunneling to have the new route, daylight at Martinez, a little bit higher than it does today, so we deal with sea level rise. The other option is to straighten out those curves around the bay and speed up the service. And both of those options are still certainly in our minds in play because they present different construction options and different political and environmental options for us in the future. Then finally, this shows the bit from Sassoon, Fairfield to Sacramento. A very important goal is to keep Union Pacific whole, and we have not met with Union Pacific yet. We are still in development on this, but the goal of keeping freight whole is very important for California, for mobility, movement of goods. So we would be looking to work with them to get them on a new alignment, perhaps on the Sacramento Northern, while we would stay on that blue alignment up towards Sacramento. So in short, this is all work in progress at this point in time. The next bit that we, as I said, we'll be looking at is the ridership piece, and we'll be essentially asking our subcommittee and then our board a value question, and based on the ridership, is this worth pursuing for the mega region? And there's some very, very challenging questions, very costly alternatives, but if we look at what our future is in terms of projected population growth, I think we see we need to face these decisions coming ahead. So the next steps, as I talked about, will be looking to bring in the ridership aspect of what a service schedule would look like using some of the engineering options I showed, some electrification, high-speed, 150-mile-an-hour trains, and we'll be examining that with our boards very shortly. And if they give us the green light, we will move ahead with some more implementation steps that we have planned. So thanks.
Right. Thank you, Jim. Any questions before we move on to high-speed rail for either
I'd
Jim
like-
or David?
Working out. I'd like to ask a little bit of a question here. I'm always looking at floodplain type stuff because as a certified floodplain manager, California went ahead and did a 200-year requirement for critical infrastructure, and every one of these lines is considered critical infrastructure under the rules, which tells me that, as you're saying, in some areas it's not just raising. I mean, everything's going to have to be raised up, no matter what, because almost none of it actually meets the 100-year in the Delta and some others anyway. So we're looking at a complete overhaul of the system. And then not only that, the question I have is talking about sea level rise. With the 200-year requirement there, I would say that pretty much it's always overbuilt anyway by the Corps of Engineers when they do their studies. They over-engineer everything on that. In other words, if they say it's 200-year and it equals that, it's more like 215, 220, just for the extra protection. Will that be considered into the factor of the sea level rise, that they always over-engineer it, or how are they going to do it regarding that? Do you know?
We're actually really not at that point right now, but that is an important consideration that we would have in the future. Right now, we're just drawing lines on a map that we presume are going to be protected or high enough, and the analysis of how high and what sort of protection would come at a later phase. But that's the kind of information and standards that we would be looking to meet. Yeah, you will have to protect it inside or put it on a trestle or a bridge structure that's high enough to warrant that level of investment. But there's a lot of challenges with rail because there's overpasses, and if you raise it up, you clip everything. So this is really a big challenge for us.
One of the points there, too, is there are certain parts of the route where it's only rail right next to the water, like between Martinez and Richmond. So the entire cost would be borne by rail. And so that's one of the factors in why we might want to move away from that route in addition to straightening out. Whereas between Richmond and Oakland, there's nowhere really to go, and the highway and the urbanized population are all in the same boat, so everybody's going to have to deal with it together. So those are some of the considerations there. Yeah.
So on one of your slides for the Suisun Fairfield to Sacramento route, or that segment, there's a reference to interaction with freight, speed, and capacity. Can you just can you give me a little more information about how you see that interaction and what are the current and near-term challenges?
Well, the long-term challenge is to operate as an electrified service. We have to be significantly far enough away from freight. And at this point in time, it looks like electrification means catenary as opposed to like a battery type of system, which is, maybe that will come along in the future. But back to freight, freight needs to serve, there's customers there. There's the Benicia refinery, and that's been in the news of late. But we have to make sure that freight continues to function in there. So there may be an issue of operating windows if the right-of-way, the passenger rail right-of-way is in public ownership. You can create windows when we're not in service so that the freight can continue to serve that, or you look at parallel infrastructure but not interoperable infrastructure in that kind of condition.
Are there current delays related to freight transfers?
Well, we have, as David mentioned, we have a lot of on-time performance incentives with Union Pacific, and we do maintain the most on-time intercity train in the United States, and that's largely thanks to Union Pacific's dispatching. We actually seem to have more difficulty with delays due to mechanicals at this point in time. So I think we're working very well with Union Pacific on their dispatching and the windows of operations that we give, plus the level of maintenance that we have on the railroad today. It really ensures that every day the railroad generally looks the same in terms of slow orders, and that's a very good thing for maintaining, dispatchers maintain, consistent on-time performance day to day, and that's for a future rider there will experience, something that's on time, and that's certainly the goal of any intercity service. ACE, San Joaquin, on-time performance is key to the service, reliability.
Celia wants to.
If I might, those are a lot of the issues that we're seeing between Sacramento and Placer County in terms of the freight capacity versus the track capacity. And I think a lot of the general public think, well, why don't you just run more trains? And of course we would love to, but Union Pacific owning the tracks and dealing with their freight capacity, that's a key issue for that. And I think I wanted to make the point that growing the service as it is now and some of the shorter term parts of the vision plan are really important in order to have the support to implement a long range plan. Because if you don't have the ridership, if you don't have the popularity, the things that we're talking about for this vision plan are incredibly expensive. As you're looking through that presentation, the dollar signs are just, everywhere. So you have to have a really strong support to have the dollars come that way, especially as we're looking to cap and trade.
Anyone else? Yeah, Carl?
Just to throw it under the bus, there's a lot of money being spent on high-speed rail. It would seem to me that a lot of the realignment to get us off of the freight lines, that money could be spent on this type of rail, intercity rail, and eventually, in the process, you're looking at speeding up that rail to 150 miles an hour. It almost seems like we're in a competition between the two, whereas if we brought the two together, we would have some synergy, and we can get the heck off of the freight tracks so that the increase we're just dealing with in this area is oil coming through at substantially larger numbers for processing in the Benicia area. So you're going to have an area that is having larger trains or more traffic for freight, and at the same time we're talking about an increase in the number of round trips in our capital quarter. It seems like we've got to get off of that alignment sooner than later. And, anyway, maybe I'm kicking the baby, but
Well, I think.
not that one on the other side,
No,
but
no. She's just.
too cute.
I think what we really view the future of the vision plan as something compatible with high-speed rail, and that's a decision for the state of California to make about its funding priorities. And in fact, the vision plan itself needs more information and detail to become even the funding priority to gain that continued support to grow. But you are precisely right. There's only so much space made out there, and so much space made for freight and passenger rail, and we're seeing that we're at a point where we need to discuss separating those two so they can keep growing on their own paths.
Jim, can
And
you
that's a big-
throw slide 18 up, though, just on I think it's relevant to this.
This one?
Yeah, because what this shows on there is potentially a completely separate freight corridor, and just want to highlight that.
Yeah. So this is really the state's going to have to work with the freight railroad operators to, offer all aspects of the state's economy some sort of vision, one for passengers and one for freight to continue to grow.
And unlike in the Bay Area where we're talking about having to acquire new rights of way, much of the area I don't know what color that is, orange, the one to the lower right, much of that is already a rail corridor that just needs to be reclaimed and obviously, modernized.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Well, we probably leave a little time for Ben since he's here. We'll move on. Can you stick around though, Jim?
Yeah. David and I
great.
will be here.
Jim actually lives here in Sacramento, so not a long trip for him to get over here. So our next speaker, Ben Treposis, it's been my pleasure to work with over the last few years. He is the Northern California Regional Director for California High-Speed Rail Authority, specifically working on the Merced North segment, including future high-speed connection to Sacramento as well as San Jose in the Bay Area. And he's been working in particular with the Central Valley group of electeds and transportation experts from the region all the way Merced up north, along with Dan Levitt, Stacy Mortensen. SACOG participates in that as well. And we really appreciate that High-Speed Rail has been willing to talk about improving that connectivity. So without further ado, Ben Treposis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, thank you for the opportunity to be with you this morning. My name is Ben Treposis. I'm the Northern California Regional Director for the California High-Speed Rail Authority. And in that capacity, I am responsible for the development of the high-speed rail project in the Northern California region, extending from the Trans-Bay Terminal in downtown San Francisco, south to Gilroy, east to Merced, and north to Sacramento. As you all know, the Merced to Sacramento project section is a phase 2 project section, but with the advent of cap and trade, certainly, and now our ability to move forward per yesterday's positive court decision to be able to sell Prop 1A bonds and move forward, our overarching goal really is to move the statewide projects forward at a much more rapid pace, not just the phase 1 projects extending from San Francisco to Los Angeles, but also to get to the phase 2 projects as quickly as possible between Merced and Sacramento and Los Angeles and San Diego. To the point that was made earlier with Jim, we have worked very hard with our partners, both on a communication standpoint and from a funding standpoint, with both our friends at the Capital Corridors and the Altamont Corridor Express. As Chair Cohn mentioned, we are working with and really utilizing the Central Valley Rail Working Group and the San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority as advisory bodies to the work that we'll be doing moving forward. between the Merced and Sacramento project section. So we're very much engaged in the early phases of outreach in the corridor to ensure that we're connecting with the communities and the policymakers and our stakeholder communities in a way that allows us to work together to begin to develop effectively a locally preferred alternative for the corridor as we move going forward. What we've taken to doing, especially with the statewide project, but certainly as it relates to the Merced-Sacramento project section, is we've begun to have what we refer to as 50-year meetings. Not that they're meetings that feel like they last 50 years, but rather, if we were all sitting here 50 years from now, what would we have wanted to have accomplished in terms of integrated rail service and providing the kinds of mobility resources from a rail standpoint 50 years from now? And what do we have to do today to ensure that we arrive at that end in mind? And that's very much what we're in the process of initiating in the Merced to Sacramento project section. We've recently procured a new regional consultant team, Precision Civil Engineering, out of Fresno, who is partnering with us to begin more in-depth analysis of the Merced to Sacramento project corridor that you see here, the project alternatives as identified here, and in the draft alternatives and analysis that was initially done for the Merced to Sacramento section. Collect along the Union Pacific and BNSF corridors with some alternatives through Stockton into Sacramento, with station areas aimed at the cities of Merced, Modesto, Stockton, Sacramento, and some possibilities for other locations that we're really looking forward to discussing with our community stakeholders, locations like 65th Street here in Sacramento, potentially Elk Grove, or some more meaningful connections in that area. So other opportunities that stakeholders have come forward to us to discuss in a more meaningful way, and which will be in the mix and under consideration as we begin to have conversations with our stakeholders going forward. As I mentioned, the Merced to Sacramento section is a Phase 2 project section. It will connect the initial operating section of the high-speed rail project at Merced in the Central Valley, and that Central Valley section, as you know, is currently under construction, the initial 29 miles under construction between Madera and Fresno. The station areas, as I mentioned, will include Sacramento, Stockton, Modesto, Merced, and a possible station at Sacramento 65th Street, along with conversation with our partners in Elk Grove. The length of the corridor is roughly 110 miles, and we'd had an initial date for a record of decision that is completing the environmental document by the end of 17. We're still in that rough time frame, and the draft alternatives analysis is a document that we're currently working with our regional consultant to use as the basis for our conversations with our community and stakeholder groups as we go forward. So the near-term project objectives really are going to focus on maximizing that stakeholder outreach and engagement. And it really is, as I said, to go out and do what I've been referring to as blue dot exercises that I'm sure many of you have participated in, where we go out to the communities and to our various stakeholders, put the butcher paper up on the wall, hand everybody a box of blue dots, and talk about the alternatives and the options and the direction that we want to take the project together, to ensure that the local communities, the local constituents, the people that will be affected and have the opportunity to help us develop the project, give us a very clear understanding of what elements of the project they want to see go forward, so that together we are evolving, as I said, a locally preferred alternative. So as we get into the more detailed and rigorous environmental clearance process, that locally preferred alternative begins to emerge and bubble up to the top of that environmental clearance process to ensure that the project throughout all of the communities that we run through is in fact an asset and not an eyesore, that it's the project that those communities and stakeholder groups have in mind as we develop the program together. So we'll aim this process at identifying stakeholder needs and values. We're going to be engaged in preliminary planning and begin to work together to develop support for those project alternatives to go forward and really end up on a regional rail concept and station location concept that all of the communities between Merced and Sacramento have invested in. So that's our primary work. The Precision Civil Engineering team has initiated the development of a stakeholder and community outreach plan, which we expect to begin to put into the field in the next several months and through the end of this year, and really begin to heavily move forward with that process throughout the next year. So that's really our primary goal, is to focus on making those connections to the local communities, evolving that locally preferred alternative, and ensuring that as we move the Merced to Sacramento project forward, we're incorporating all of that input. And our intent is that as soon as we are able to accelerate the development of the Phase 1 project sections between San Francisco and Los Angeles, that will afford us the opportunity to move Merced, Sacramento, and LA San Diego forward much more quickly and much more aggressively. That's my update. I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, yeah, Tom.
We heard a presentation on the San Joaquin train earlier. Would this segment of the high-speed rail replace the segment of the San Joaquin from Merced to Sacramento, or would it be two routes?
Two routes. Yeah, we will. The goal in all of our regional rail conversations, where we're in part funding and coordinating our efforts with our regional rail partners, is to enhance those systems, ensure that they're building up their ridership and expanding their service in a way that allows them to be more effective feeders to future high-speed rail.
The only other thing I'd like to offer as a comment is I really don't feel the high-speed rail program is getting the message out that it's part of a system. People see it in isolation, and it makes less sense when they see it that way. If people understood more of this network concept, I think there would be a better understanding.
Well, thank you for that comment, and we're working very hard to do that.
Yeah, and some of the planning that we've been doing with the Central Valley Working Group has been alluded to. Specifically in our region, we're looking potentially to do stations. Dan Levitt showed in his slide at Elk Grove and 65th Street that could be part of that regional rail system we were talking about that could connect to high speed at Merced, but also offer very frequent fast service even between Sacramento, Merced, or Stockton over to San Jose in the meantime. You know, if we have trouble getting into downtown Sacramento for a while, because that's more challenging, 65th Street and Elk Grove would still offer ways to connect. So that's one example. We're also working on the downtown station. We're going to be embarking on what's called Phase 3. You know, Phase 2 is the depot renovation that we're just now starting. Phase 1 was the track relocation and the platforms the way that you see them now. So Phase 3 is kind of filling out the rest, making sure light rail connects directly at the station, but also making plans for where future high-speed platform would be and how that would integrate with everything else at the rail yards. Anyone else?
I'd like to make a little comment here.
Yeah.
Based upon, as I've done in the past, the travel that I've done in other countries and stuff, where their infrastructure is actually based upon rail from the very beginning, and they had a very robust support system already in place. I'll specifically speak to Japan because they had a fantastic, robust system between their towns and cities, and then what they did is they put the high-speed rail in just to enhance what they already had existing. And that's the major concern I have here, is that while they are starting to recognize the need, as Chairman has said, about our shorter distances and having them quickly move to where high-speed rail is supposed to be at, I think it's woefully inadequate at this time. And I really believe that our Bay Area phase of this really needs to be stepped up, and more funding between the Merced and Sacramento if it's going to be successful. I mean, without that and the support there, it will the whole system will fail. There's not enough money to go around, even if it means delaying a little bit of the high-speed rail timing. The other support critical infrastructure has to be there for it to be a success. And that's been proven in Europe. It's been proven in the eastern, southeastern countries where they're based upon rail and bicycles. That's one of the other things you'll see there is rail and bicycles all over those countries. So I'm a little concerned that we still are not stepping up enough money and programs to get the support from the communities that would be perhaps going to the high-speed rail in the future.
I couldn't agree with you more, and the authority's perspective is that it's not a zero-sum game. We've invested in the Altamont corridor, we've invested in the Merced to Sacramento corridor with Prop 1A funds. We'll continue to work with our partners to secure portions of cap and trade funds and other resources as they become available to make the kind of investments that you're talking about, because you're exactly right. The notion of having improved regional rail systems to serve as feeders to high-speed rail is critical to high-speed rail success. So we are very much in this together. The Northern California rail partners work together on a regular basis. Dan and David and Jim and I are working with all of our partners to ensure that we're trying to take that 50-year strategy so we ensure we're clear on what the regional vision, not just the high-speed vision is being implemented. And as I said at the outset, it's having those 50-year meetings, identifying those 50-year visions so we make sure that we're making the kinds of improvements today that will get us to the goal that you're talking about, to have the kind of robust system that Japan has between Tokyo and Hokkaido, where millions of passengers take it on a daily basis. And there's clearly pent-up demand between Sacramento and Merced that we can address.